Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker.
I call the honourable member Claire Curran.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, I didn't sit on the Select Committee for this bill, and so I can't comment on the amount of discussion that went on, and no doubt my colleague who is yet to speak will have some things to say about that. But I've got a few things to say about the issues that surround what this bill represents, because we exist in a digital age where this is the era of the internet. Almost everything that people are doing in their lives have something to do with the internet, and usage of the internet in our country, as in every other country, is going up. And it's absolutely critical that we get legislation, regulation in place to enable transactions, to enable all kinds of manners of things to happen via the internet in a way that takes into account privacy issues, but also enables people to have access to the things that they need to have access to. So we all support this bill. I don't know if it's I'd describe it as a little ripper of a bill, because it does seem to me, I have to say, going through it, that there has been an awful lot of changes made to it since it went to Select Committee. But I want to make a couple of comments. This is essentially about balance. It's about getting the balance right between, I think as Internet New Zealand said in their submission, between efficient administration and the protection of privacy information. Now, if we can't get this stuff right, then how can we expect the rest of the country, the rest of the population, the private sector to get it right? And it seems to me that we're a bit behind the eight ball, and in much of our approach to legislation, to the regulatory environment, to how the reality of the private sector that it's operating out there, and to the behaviours of people in their daily lives and how they access the internet and what they're doing on the internet. And it really concerns me that probably the vast majority of members of Parliament in the New Zealand Parliament really don't have a clue about the importance of the internet in our lives. We pay lip service to it, but we really don't have a clue. And this was evidenced in the last couple of years with all the debate around copyright and people's general ignorance of what copyright actually means on the internet and what the actual behaviours of people are in the population, and why there is such a degree of illegal online downloading going on. But the two things I want to say are that it's absolutely critical that this remains an optional system, because while this is the age of the internet, and there's something, I think it's 86% of New Zealanders are on the internet, there's still a proportion of New Zealanders who don't and can't access the internet, and there is a growing digital divide in this country. And I certainly note that one of the submitters, I think it was actually the Dunedin Community Law Centre, gave a very good submission around how important it was that this individual's use of the service remains optional, because of the fact that there are still people who can't access the internet, and they make reference to the digital divide. And for a government that's putting in place one of its flagship programs of broadband, and making a great big song and dance about how it's all going to give us all faster, cheaper access to the internet. There's no doubt, and there is actually an inquiry going on at this very moment into this issue, and to the end, submitter after submitter is telling us that we have to be concerned about the digital divide, and the fact that the lower socio-economic parts of New Zealand are going to receive faster, cheaper broadband at some point way out in the future, and that these people, and these are kids growing up in New Zealand, who are not getting the same kind of access that other parts of New Zealand are. Now, here we are putting in place a piece of legislation which is essentially about trying to make things more efficient, and I think the regulatory impact statement certainly makes reference to the millions of dollars, between $385 million and $527 million that's going to be saved through this. Now, that's a good thing, but what about the other side of the equation and the number of children who are starting school today and who will be going through school and maybe even come out of school without having had access to this faster, cheaper broadband at school and also in their homes? Now, this is a critical issue for New Zealand, and members on that side of the House haven't got their heads around copyright issues. They haven't got their heads around the fact that there is a growing digital divide in this country, and ultimately, while there might be a little ripper of a piece of legislation being put in place to try and make it more efficient for people to actually be identified online so that they can do their business online, the big issue is how many New Zealanders will have the means to access it.
I call the Honourable Member Gareth Hughes.